The Sopranos is one of the most acclaimed and revered television shows of all time, so at one point or another it was bound to make a resurgence, and now it's here. This is my review of the Many Saints of Newark. Young Anthony Soprano is growing up in one of the most tumultuous eras in Newark's history, becoming a man just as rival gangsters begin to rise up and challenge the all-powerful DiMeo crime family's hold over the increasingly race-torn city. Caught up in these changing times is the uncle he idolizes, Dickie Moltisanti, who struggles to balance his professional and personal responsibilities, and whose influence will transform the impressionable teenager to the infamous mob boss Tony Soprano, or at least that synopsis is the one you can find on Letterboxd, Wikipedia, IMDb, everywhere. But this film really is a Dickie Moltisanti story. Tony Soprano is there, he's a presence, but this is Moltisanti's story. But before I start with my proper review, I want you to start with the conversation down there in the comments below. Share all your thoughts on The Sopranos, on this film. If you're excited, if you're not, how do you rank the seasons? Let me know all of that. And if you like what you see here, make sure you click the subscribe button if you haven't yet, so you can join the conversation every time there's more talk about any of your favorite movies or TV shows. I watched The Sopranos a few years ago. I watched the first season, and for some reason I just fell off of that show, not that I didn't enjoy it. So I basically went into this film being new to this world, to this fandom per se. I was very blind to it. I just knew the basics of it, and there are certainly references there that are not so subtle. Even as someone who has not seen The Sopranos, I could catch on to those references. But this is very much a mob movie from the 60s and 70s. It's not just a gimmick that the film is set in those times, it feels very much like it was made with the same sensibilities, the same archetypes, with the right focus on family and on the business of the family and how that influences one another. Dickie Moltisanti, played by Alessandro Nivola, he's excellent in this role, and Dickie is such a complex character. I was truly immersed in his struggles, in his victories, in his losses throughout this film, and the film kept me engaged because there's this constant sense of a ticking time bomb at every scene in the film that Dickie is involved in. Every time he's talking to someone, whether someone he knows from the business, whether someone from the family, there's this sense of tension that either of the parties talking or doing something together could make the wrong move and end up sleeping with the fishes. The film is also very violent. It shouldn't be called an action movie. I think that's very wrong to say, but whenever the violence comes on screen, whenever there is action on screen, it's very violent, and the film also has this very dark sense of humor that I appreciate, because that's my type of sense of humor. There's a lot of intrigue at where this is going, how this will unfold, and a lot of interesting family dynamics. Ray Liotta, who's in this film, and he delivers the best performance he has given in years. He has a very interesting role to play. I think it's kind of spoilery to step into who he plays, so I'm just gonna let you watch the movie. The cast is also filled with familiar faces, from Vera Farmiga to John Bernthal to Corey Stoll to Leslie Odom Jr., and everyone is great. This is a fantastic and very talented ensemble cast. Michael Gandolfini, the real-life son of James Gandolfini, he's actually pretty great as Tony Soprano, but as I said, Tony Soprano, he's there. He's someone who is very much a fan of his uncle, and the moments where we see these two together are very well handled. I really like the building of that relationship, but he doesn't have that much of an impact in the story, to the point where when something big happens, you don't really feel it from the perspective of Tony Soprano, emotionally speaking. You understand why it affects him, but it doesn't really speak to you. And that brings me generally into the drawbacks of the film, because the film has the right focus on family and the family business and the struggles that come with balancing both for Dickie Moltisanti, but it has a really weird structure. It feels like there was a season of The Sopranos, or at least to build to the show that we know as The Sopranos, but they had to cram it down to 2 hours of filmmaking. The film structurally has this constant feel of a highlight reel. There are scenes, certainly when it focuses on Dickie Moltisanti, that it flows much better in parts, but the whole just really feels intercut into pivotal moments. So these are glimpses into the life of this big mob family, but it doesn't really linger on any of these moments long enough for it to flow and feel seamless from one scene to the next. Even time jumps are very badly done. This film is jumping through a lot of years, and it's kind of hard to buy into. Even though the trailers are selling the film to you, that relationship between the adolescent Tony Soprano and his uncle, that's the second half of the film. Up until then, the film is much more streamlined. I thought the first half flowed and built up much better, where the second half is just a bunch of scenes that had the filmmakers realized that they didn't have an entire season of television to tell this story. The Many Saints of Newark is a solid gangster film that brings back a lot of sensibilities and a lot of qualities from old school gangster films, but at the same time it's trying to catch you up so you can maybe start watching The Sopranos. I think it's very welcoming to new fans. Again, references there that I'm very sure I didn't catch, references there that even not being a fan of the show, not having seen the entire show, I couldn't help but miss. When it focuses on its lead character, it works very well when it tries to connect to the whole family and tell this big saga of the DiMeo family. It's when it falls short and has the most drawbacks. It's perfectly watchable, just not as great as, in my guess, the show itself is. I'm giving The Many Saints of Newark a C+. Now, those are my thoughts on The Many Saints of Newark, but I want to know your thoughts, so start the conversation on the film, on the show. How does one compare to the other? Throw it all down there, and if you watched this far and enjoyed what you saw, make sure you click that button and you'll join every conversation in the future about your favorite movies and TV shows. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back very soon with more reviews, and you can go and see my review for Star Wars Visions that is up right now on the channel. I hope to see you there and in all the conversations in the future. So until then, love each other and love the movies.